UFC 310 just wrapped up, and although it met my expectations, I expected this card to be awesome, and it absolutely was. It was stained by a couple of horrible judges' decisions, and it just so happened that the fighters that got screwed over in those fights have the lesser name, but this card was awesome. Fighters lost aura, fighters gained aura. One fighter even retired. The legend himself might be hanging up the gloves. And I mean, he's a legend. People don't like when I say that, but Anthony Smith is actually a UFC legend. Out of every single fighter on the roster, he is top 50 most relevant fighters. He gets lots of views on his interviews. He's entertaining. We're always, tuning in to see what's going on with his fights, right? It's sad that he might be retiring. So we're going to talk about that, okay? Garry and Shavkat Rakhmonov. That may have been the only fight that didn't really live up to the expectations. It was a lot slower than I expected, probably a lot slower than most people expected, but still a very high-level matchup. And I was impressed by one of them, not so much the other. But first, Alexandre Pantoja, Asakura. Listen, the first thing I have to say is I'm just happy that the UFC champion destroyed a champion in another promotion. And people are going to be saying, why do you care, man? Because the UFC is by far the best promotion, and it would be kind of sad to see someone else from a totally different promotion come in here and take the UFC champ who's closing in on GOAT status in his own division to a competitive decision, let alone knock him out. And I will say, I was impressed with Asakura. That flying knee that he threw instantly, that was unbelievably scary. That was a hairy moment. He landed some great shots. He looked entertaining. He looked dangerous. He is a dangerous fighter. I can't wait to see him in striking battles. But Pantoja got him out of there easier than Moreno, easier than Royval, and kind of showed that, listen, a risen champ, that guy's not even top 5 level in the UFC. All right? I'm happy that he held it down because I know there's the real hardcore fans reside. They reside over there in the Risens, Bellators. But UFC reigns supreme again. We weren't about to let this smiley pants, force type, me character come in here. UFC thought they could do that. I kind of found it funny when, Pantoja's walking out. He's the grizzled vet. He's got battle scars. He looks like he's been in 100 wars. He just has the look of a UFC guy that's been through it all. And then here comes Asakura doing the moves, of a cool guy in the 80s, right? He's doing the cool guy in the 80s moves. And it's like, man, this guy's like 30 years behind. This is some shit that they would have a Wii character do, right? In the 2000s. And the UFC thinks they can just sneak this guy in here, tell us that he's basically Muhammad Ali in Japan, and doesn't think we're going to notice. We noticed. All right, we noticed. He ain't Muhammad Ali in Japan. I think that his hype is a little bit forced. Again, he's a big star in Japan. I'm not going to sit here and say he's not, but the way they talk about this guy, superstar. Why? He's a fun fighter. But come on, man. Like, he's got 500K on Instagram. That's not next level. All right. Like, listen, this guy, I like his style. I really, really look forward to seeing him in striking battles. But as far as his hype is concerned, it definitely seemed to be a little bit forced. But, he's doing the moves, and people are like, whoa, man. But not me, man. Not me. I know Pantoja was going to go out there and hold it down for the UFC. Pantoja held it down for the UFC. How good this win is, by the way, will depend on Asakura's future, because he's now in the big leagues. This is either going to age well or it's not going to age that well. I mean, it's hard for a second round finish to age poorly because it's just objectively a really good win. He did it dominantly. But in general, if Asakura goes out there and wins his next 3 fights and works his way back up to a belt, then that win is going to age even better and better and better. And my take on Asakura's skill level may age poorly. But either way, he's one of those extremely entertaining, caution to the wind, he's like a Yuri Prohaska at flyweight, obviously more skilled, more technical, but that's kind of the way he fights. Just all gas, no brakes, very entertaining. But I'm happy that Pantoja got it done. And I'm also really happy that Pantoja got it done in not only dominant fashion, but like made it entertaining on the feet. Damn near knocked out Kai Asakura in the first round with that right hand, but then he immediately jumped on a wrestling opportunity. And not only that, but like outstruck him in the first, was landing a lot of good body kicks, and then submitted him in the second round. You know, sometimes we've seen Pantoja hold people down in half guard, and he's not been getting those finishes recently, but I'm really happy that it was an entertaining fight. He looked awesome. Both guys looked very skilled, very dangerous. And because of the co-main event that was a little bit slow, that didn't live up to our expectations, this was the perfect fight to have for a flyweight champion, because automatically the flyweight champs are always the least popular champions. That's just unfortunately the case. That's how it is. But Pantoja, especially Pantoja, he's not a trash talker. He doesn't have like these, crazy numbers on his interviews. He needed a fight like this where it was entertaining, it was fast, there was not a single boring moment, and now people know, especially a lot of the people in the stadium, because a lot of hardcore fans don't go to the fights. A lot of the people in the stadium are like, a lot of them are hardcore fans, but some of them are just people like, yeah, my friend's getting tickets, man, I'm gonna go, and they're like, oh shit, we got to watch these small fries fight, and then they go out there and have a much more entertaining fight than the co-main event that everyone was hyped for. And now they're interested in watching an Alexandre Pantoja fight again. The next time they see him on a UFC card, they'll be like, all right, this guy's a beast. This guy's a fucking monster. And that's great. I'm happy for Pantoja because I think this does a lot for his stardom. I think this is going to be great for his argument in the pound-for-pound rankings and in the GOAT conversation. Because I think with this win, although... Listen, I understand that Kai Asakura is making his UFC debut. He's done nothing in the big leagues, but he's a solid fighter. Being a champion in another organization, it's not like you're just coming over from another organization as like a ranked fighter. Like, this guy was the champ. It's an okay win. It's not a great win. It'll only be a great win if he continues to win. But I'm just going to have to say it. Pantoja's closing in on Demetrious Johnson. And I know that right there, what I said right there is going to make people roll their eyes. And I'm going to stand by this. Demetrious Johnson is not a top 5 fighter of all time. So it's not like Pantoja, who wasn't in my top 15 fighters list recently, is just going to pass him with this. He's not past him, by the way. I don't think he's past DJ yet. But the point that I'm trying to make is DJ, the best fighters that he fought were Henry Cejudo and Benavidez. He's 1-1 with one of them. Demetrious Johnson... his UFC debut title defense was against, Tim Elliott, who actually, it wasn't his debut. He got cut from the UFC. Pantoja's taking on champs of Risen. DJ was taking on champs of Tough, the Ultimate Fighter winners. So I think things can be pretty even, right? But my point is, Pantoja's just clearly fought better levels of competition and beat better levels of competition. And the only argument against that, which is a very weak argument in my opinion, is, well, no one had the chance to look like good competition against DJ, right? Moreno, his name was built off of having competitive fights with Davidson Figueiredo, but no one could build a name in a Demetrious Johnson fight. Yeah, but it's like you still have an opportunity to build a name outside of the fight, right? Robert Whittaker outside of fighting Adesanya. Let's forget about the second fight. Let's just talk about everything leading up into the second fight. Robert Whittaker's still a middleweight legend. Before the rematch with Adesanya, despite the fact that he looked terrible in the first Adesanya fight, he still had his own legacy. He still beat Yoel. He still beat other fighters. Demetrious Johnson had Cejudo. He had Benavidez, who had their own legacies. Everyone else is just nowhere near the level of a Moreno, of a Kai Kara France, of a Brandon Royval. Okay? Even Perez, bro. Even Perez has a better resume than a lot of fighters that DJ took out. When are we going to start talking about Alexandre Pantoja as not only one of the most skilled fighters ever, but one of the GOATs? All right? Like, this is the thing that kind of annoys me. Everyone's got DJ. Oh, DJ's top 5. DJ's top 5. But no other bantamweight, no other flyweight is even close. What other bantamweight gets talked about as being a GOAT? Only Dominick Cruz? So let me guess, in the top 15 discussions, top 20 discussions, we can only bring up DJ and we can have Dominick Cruz, but we can't have an Alexandre Pantoja We can't have a Peter Yan. We can't have a Merab Dvalishvili. It just doesn't make any fucking sense. Because these divisions, for the past 6 years basically, these divisions have had marquee title fights, right? We've had rivalries. We've had big names. Moreno, Figueiredo, right? Yan, O'Malley, Aljo. It's time to start including some of these guys that are racking up title wins, that are racking up good, solid ranked wins in the modern era against names in our GOAT discussions. I don't know where this puts Pantoja on the all-time list because, again, a Kai Asakura win would not be the same as, like, if he were to rematch Figueiredo. He lost to Figueiredo, Pantoja, that is. If he were to rematch Figueiredo at flyweight, then that'd be a much better win. Like, a Kai Asakura win is not going to, okay, now he's over this guy and this guy. It doesn't do that much for him, but it is just a decent win. It's, right now, in my opinion, it's the equivalent of fighting like a number 12 ranked contender, right? Sort of like an Usyk, but even Usyk had wins in the UFC. But like, if he goes out there and beats Kai Kara France again, like if Pantoja just goes out there and beats another highly ranked contender, we got to start thinking about this guy as a top 15 all-time fighter. He is a modern-day flyweight UFC champion with 3 wins over a top 5 flyweight of all time in Brandon Moreno, with multiple wins over Royval, who he dominated in the second fight and finished in the first fight. And Royval is a fucking beast. Royval just beat a guy that's better than Kai Asakura and Tatsudo Taira. I mean, we got to start talking about him as a top 15 fighter very soon. This win, if Kai Asakura goes out there and wins 2 more fights before Pantoja even fights again, that is the type of thing to put him in the top 15. So a lot will depend on Kai Asakura's future. He called out Demetrius Johnson. Let's get to that. I'm not saying he's better than DJ. I still think he needs to do a tiny bit more just because, I mean, it's kind of cringe that I even say that. Like, I don't think DJ's legacy is that far ahead. That's all I'm going to say. I certainly don't understand how you can get from Pantoja's not even top 15, but DJ at number 3, though. Especially when a lot of DJs, especially at like flyweight, when a lot of DJ's good wins are at 135 and 1FC, but whatever. Listen, he called out Demetrius Johnson. I don't think Demetrius Johnson's going to come back. I don't think he should come back because he isn't in his prime. And Pantoja's a different level than Moraes. But also, Demetrius Johnson is not going to get a huge payday, in my opinion. Like, the UFC would definitely be willing to bring him back because I think at this point, Demetrius Johnson is a much bigger name than he was when he left the UFC. That's just clear. He's like a fan favorite. People love Demetrius Johnson. We all respect Demetrius Johnson, and we loved watching him fight. We know he's one of the most skilled fighters ever, if not the most skilled fighter ever. But will the UFC offer him $5 to $10 million? I don't know. Will he come back for anything less? I don't think so. Should they? I mean, I would love to see the fight, but to be honest, a part of me doesn't want to see the fight just because I don't think DJ's in his prime anymore. He's still very good. He's one of the few lighter fighters that can still maintain his speed and be slick in his late 30s, in these lighter weight classes. But it's just simply not going to be prime DJ. It just isn't. And if Pantoja beats him, I don't know. I just don't want to see Demetrius Johnson come back to a UFC title fight and get beat, to be honest. Like, I think it would be kind of sad. He's not in his prime. And maybe if he was like 36, it would be different, but he's not. So I don't really need to see that fight. It would be interesting. It would be the biggest fight you could make at flyweight. I know why Pantoja's calling him out. It's a good call out, but I don't think we're going to see it. And I don't mind not seeing it. If both of these guys were fighting in their prime, that'd be really interesting. I think Demetrius Johnson would have a really tough fight with Pantoja. I don't know who would win that. Maybe DJ would win that, but who would win now? I'd have to pick Pantoja. I just would. But Demetrius Johnson's getting better with his grappling. He's pretty hard to hold down, but is his chin the same as it used to be? And Pantoja's basically unfinishable right now. So I think he would probably win now, but it's just not prime versus prime. So I don't really need to see that. But I think Pantoja is 1 solid win away or 3 Kai Asakura wins away, meaning if Kai Asakura continues to win, from being top 15 of all time. Like, I don't know. It's just really weird how these flyweight champions Like, we'll say Pereira. Pereira's top 10 now after beating Jamal Hill and Yuri Prohaska. It's like Brandon Moreno has a better resume than Yuri Prohaska and Jamal Hill. And Pantoja beat him 3 times. And he's also beat Brandon Royval. But he's not even in our top 15. It's unfortunate. We really have to think about that. So I'm happy that Pantoja had a really good performance. He put on for the flyweight division. That was probably the best performance of his entire career in regards to blowing up his stock. Outside of the Moreno war, of course. Let's talk about this. Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Garry. I'm actually happy with what happened in this fight. Like, I think that this fight definitely fell short of our expectations. I was saying this was going to be a war, but I'm kind of happy that a lot of interesting things happened. Number one, did you guys think Ian Garry was going to come close to submitting Shavkat Rakhmonov? And I'm not going to lie, I want to ask you guys if you were. I couldn't help myself but cheer for him when he actually had the rear naked choke and it seemed to be locked in. It actually was locked in. I was actually hoping that he would pull it off just because of how crazy of an upset that would be and the fashion in which he would pull the upset off by rear naked choke against Shavkat Rakhmonov. It's one thing if you KO him, but submitting him, checkmating Shavkat, the technical maestro with a great submission game, I kind of felt bad for Garry when he couldn't get it because he got so close to subbing MVP, and he said that he was really frustrated with himself that he wasn't able to finish it, and he was like beating himself up after that fight, talking about how Oliveira and Damian Maia had kind of coached him through the rear naked choke a million times, and he was pissed that he couldn't pull it off. Now, Shavkat Rakhmonov's just super tough, ice in his veins. He's exactly the kind of fighter to not get choked out just because he's tucking his chin. He's got like the Volkanovski submission defense, right? The Jan-like submission defense. So I'm not surprised that Shavkat got out. But man, I was just hoping that Garry would pull it off in that moment. That would have been such an insane upset, such a crazy way to get it done. Unfortunately, he couldn't do it, but he still won that round. I had this fight 48-47 for Shavkat Rakhmonov. I picked him to win this fight, and he got it done. But I thought he would get a finish, and if not a finish, I thought it would be a brutal war. But I was a little bit let down by Shavkat's fight style, which, in my opinion, the boring moments in this fight were due to Shavkat Rakhmonov. And I'm going to talk about this for a long time, okay? Because I actually critiqued Shavkat's performance against Wonderboy for the same reason. All right. And I said back when that happened, I said that Shavkat Rakhmonov is not an insanely entertaining fighter. He's entertaining, but he has the capability for very boring fights sometimes. And I think that's because, again, the Jeff Neal fight was one of the best fights I've ever seen, one of the greatest fights of all time. And I think that kind of spoiled us when it came to Shavkat Rakhmonov's style and our expectations of it. But he's just not been able to live up to that sense. And to be honest, listen, this is a nuanced discussion because some people are going to hear me critiquing Shavkat right now, and they're going to say, hey, his pinky toe was broken. Hey, oh, he bumped into a table that morning. It's like, dude, we're going to be critical. A fight just took place, and we had a lot of expectations, all right? I'm going to be critical of Ian Garry as well. But what I'm going to say about Shavkat is he lost aura in this fight, and I think that we saw some holes in his game that were shown to us in the Jeff Neal fight, that were shown to us in the Wonderboy fight, but were absolutely confirmed in this fight. I know Ian Garry has good takedown defense. I understand that. He's a great athlete. His takedown defense is good. Amazing. And that doesn't surprise me. Garry seems to be someone that like really trains hard, wants to be as complete as possible. He's always looking to get better. But Shavkat Rakhmonov's wrestling, I mean, listen, he couldn't take down Jeff Neal. I know people were saying, oh, he missed weight. He missed weight. All right, he couldn't get him down once. And I've seen Bilal Muhammad dunk Wonderboy easily. I've seen Joaquin Buckley pick Wonderboy up and dunk him. Now, the fact that Shavkat can control Wonderboy and submit him is unbelievable. I'm just talking about pure wrestling, the ability to take someone to the mat. Shavkat Rakhmonov is not a dominant wrestler. I know that he's got the OV. I know that people in passing, if they were breaking down a Shavkat fight or just talking about him, they would say, oh, Shavkat, amazing striking, submission game, amazing wrestling. He does not have great wrestling. Okay? Shavkat Rakhmonov, he's the kind of guy, he'll take you up against the fence, he'll clinch, and he might not get a single takedown. He'll really have to work for it against the high-level opponents. Bilal's a better wrestler. Usman's a better wrestler. All right, there's a lot of better wrestlers than Shavkat. What makes him dangerous is that he's dangerous on the feet. He was the only fighter in this fight that had moments where it looked like the other guy was getting rocked. All right, Shavkat Rakhmonov had moments where he was landing a spinning back fist or landing a right hand or landing a head kick where you were worried about Ian Garry because he was getting stung. Shavkat's always dangerous, and he's entertaining on the feet. But he's a clinch guy. Because his wrestling is not that dominant, he's going to have to work really hard in the clinch. And what does that tell me about his future? How is he going to do against a Belal Muhammad or a Makhachev? Because those guys are amazing wrestlers. And I know Ian Garry's a great grappler. I understand that. That's clear. But if Garry's taking Shavkat's back, I think Makhachev can do it. I think Belal could possibly do it. And I think Belal and Makhachev could take him down. And I also don't think Shavkat can take them down. Now, again, things are complicated because I'm not saying these guys just beat him, because I still think Shavkat is probably going to beat Belal. But that's for different reasons. That's because it's easier to hit Belal than it is Garry. It's easier to hit Makhachev than it is Garry because Gary's a tall, rangy guy who's got really good footwork. And Makhachev is going to have to close that distance and take a lot of punches, right? But if Shavkat Rakhmonov's offensive wrestling is not that great, I think that his defensive wrestling is also not going to be that excellent. He's not a wrestler. He is a great grappler with excellent striking and okay wrestling. He was the guy that again, made it a little bit boring in this fight, in these clinching moments. Like, where were the knees? Where were the elbows? You know, I know Garry was making him work, but I was a little bit disappointed in the activity of Shavkat Rakhmonov. And yeah, I mean, he won this fight. Let's actually break down the fight. First 2 rounds, I gave it to Shavkat Rakhmonov. And I think the reason why he won those rounds is because it seemed like he was imposing his will. And Ian Garry, on the other hand, was reacting to what Shavkat was doing. Ian Garry was sort of, in my opinion, it looked like he was waiting to see Shavkat show him his cards. What's Shavkat going to do? Oh, we got to see what he does. Shavkat just goes out there and strikes freely. You know, he's throwing spinning back kicks. He's throwing spinning back fists. He's letting his hands go. He's not worried about getting hit. Garry doesn't hit that hard, right? Shavkat has a granite chin. Of course, he's not worried about getting hit, but Shavkat Rakhmonov was just much more comfortable on the feet, and his striking actually looked really good. Again, he may have not had the volume on his side in this fight, but in the early rounds, he was the one that was opening up. He was the one that was actually not caring about getting hit, fully committing to his strikes, and he was rocking Ian Garry, and he won the first 2 rounds because of that. I was a little bit disappointed with Garry's activity there as well, because listen, I gave Garry the 3rd round, and I gave him the 5th round because of the submission attempt. If Ian Garry had went out there and actually opened up a little bit more and let his hands go, let his kicks go a little bit more in one of the first 2 rounds, maybe this is a 48-47 in his favor. But it's easier said than done. You know, it's not easy to let your hands go against Shavkat because, again, it's like there's a reason why Ian Garry wasn't just throwing his jab out there every couple of seconds and throwing his right hand behind it. It's because of Shavkat Rakhmonov's power. It's because he felt the right hand, the spinning back fist. And Shavkat Rakhmonov is one of those guys where, you know, he's very, very dangerous. And he's got good, accurate striking. And so it seemed like Garry was very aware early on that this is a guy that can knock me out, right? So it was interesting because I really think that Shavkat was the one that was on the offensive, comfortable first 2 rounds, and Garry did not look comfortable. He looked like he was biding his time, looked like he was overly cautious. But then in the 3rd round, you started to see him pick up confidence, and he started picking Shavkat Rakhmonov apart quite easily and shutting him down on the feet at range with the kicks, with the jabs, still getting popped around. It still looked like Shavkat's punches were a lot harder, but Garry clearly won that 3rd round. 4th round, I believe Ian Garry made a mistake. Shavkat, I think, took him down once. And then Garry tried to scramble up to his feet, got up to his feet, and instead of disengaging, because this is at this point in the fight, he's actually starting to take over on the feet. Instead of disengaging, letting Shavkat stand up and attempting to outstrike him again, he goes for a choke. He goes for a guillotine. And Shavkat Rakhmonov outscrambles him, then gets dominant position. So that's another critical mistake that Ian Garry made. Listen, all I'm going to say is this. These guys are very evenly matched. Garry exceeded my expectations. Shavkat Rakhmonov, I'm not surprised that he couldn't get the takedowns that easily, right? And I'm not surprised that he is as dangerous as he is on the feet. But I knew it was going to be competitive. I just expected it to be competitive, but a war, and it wasn't. So I'm a little bit disappointed. But either way, Ian Garry doesn't make that mistake in the fourth round where he goes for that choke, where he's out ahead on the feet. And then Rakhmonov takes advantage of it and gets control time to win the round. If Ian Garry just lets his hands go a little bit more in the early rounds, maybe he wins this fight. Again, he didn't, right? You could say, well, my grandma had wheels, she'd be a bus. I understand that, but this is one of those matchups where I could see either guy winning. I think if these guys rematch, I could easily see Garry winning that fight. But one thing that I have to say about Ian Garry, this is another worry that I have for him. And I've been talking about this for a very long time, and people scoff at this, but I swear this guy was faster in the beginning of his career. I know his kicks are still great. I get that. But his hand speed, his explosivity, his power, he, in my opinion, has been getting a little bit smaller from fight to fight. And I'm worried that his vegan diet, I know people are going to roll, oh, here comes the diet. Yeah, welcome to Earth, where actually the diet plays a role in your function. What you eat matters. What you eat will translate to how your body functions and how you recover. That shouldn't be a surprise. I think Garry used to be a little bit faster. And he's cautious early on. He obviously got out struck by MVP, and MVP is a lot faster, and he's always going to be faster than his opponents. But Garry was very cautious on the feet with MVP, and I didn't expect him to be as cautious with Shavkat, but he was. I don't see the same free movement Ian Garry. Early on, he's kind of fighting like a bit of a Kamaru. He's kind of moving around like a Kamaru Usman a little bit. Just very simple movement. Whereas I'm used to seeing the Ian Garry that's flowing around the octagon, like the third round. But he seems very cautious. He's not as fast as he used to be. I don't know if he's as effective in early rounds. I think his fight IQ helps him a lot. When he finds his range, I think that's when he starts to do really well. But I'm a little bit worried for him because I don't know if his speed is as good as it used to be. But maybe that's just, maybe that's BS. All right, maybe that's BS. But we saw an overly cautious Ian Garry in the first couple of rounds. Showed some great takedown defense, but Shavkat Rakhmonov was just the guy that was comfortable. He was fully committing to his strikes, landed the bigger shots. He took the first two rounds. Ian Garry finally started opening up in the third, won that round. Shavkat Rakhmonov was getting slightly outstruck in the fourth. Ian Garry got out of a bad grappling position, went for a submission, and kind of fumbled it by engaging in the grappling. And then in the fifth round, Garry damn near chokes out Shavkat Rakhmonov. And I thought this was an amazing fight. And I think that both of these guys are future champions. I think these are the second and third best fighter in this division by far. Garry's grappling is amazing. We know that he trains with Oliveira and Damian Maia, but training with, really impressive athletes doesn't always mean that you are going to become really impressive. I mean, there are people on Team Khabib that are not great UFC fighters, that are just like run-of-the-mill MMA fighters, that have been training with Khabib and Makhachev for forever, like Abu Bakr, right? Zubaida Tukhugov. But Garry is one of those guys where he's extremely talented, and him training with an Oliveira and Damian Maia is paying off, and we're seeing that. Who would win in a rematch? Again, that's why I really love this fight, because I think Garry could pull it off in a rematch. I really do. And Shavkat Rakhmonov could as well. But one thing that we definitely learned is that Ian Garry has amazing offensive grappling. I mean, for him to take Shavkat's back that easily, to sink in the body triangle that easily, and to almost choke him out, he's going to be really pissed off at the fact that he couldn't finish that choke, because it's the second fight in a row where he got close to it and he couldn't pull it off. Part of that is just because Shavkat is just built different. But either way, his offensive grappling impressed me. His takedown defense impressed me. And Shavkat Rakhmonov, his striking, he looked as dangerous as ever. But his wrestling is something that we are going to have to start talking about as being a little bit of I'm not going to say a weakness, but it's definitely not a strength. And people aren't going to like that because they're going to have the take of, oh, why? Because it was competitive. Shavkat's all of a sudden not a perfect fighter. It's like, yes, because there were moments where he looked like he could not pull things off. Those moments did not show strengths. Rather, they showed holes in his game. He is someone that will really, really have to work his ass off to get a takedown. All right? His grappling is great, but I think people can out-wrestle him. And I don't see Shavkat Rakhmonov as this unstoppable guy, right? I think it'll be really interesting to see him and Belal fight because Belal Muhammad is going to go for the wrestling. Belal Muhammad will come after him. Now, it's going to be a lot easier for Shavkat to hit Belal, and if Shavkat hits you, he can damage you, and I think that he might be able to TKO Belal. But if Belal gets him down, I think he could out-grapple Shavkat. And that's the thing that I saw in this fight. He can be taken down. He can be out-wrestled. And he can possibly be finished on the ground. Even though he didn't get submitted, like, people can put him in those bad positions. And Makhachev could potentially do that as well. I think Makhachev sitting cage side is liking the potential matchup more than before. Okay, Shavkat Rakhmonov lost a little bit of that killer mystique. All right, but that's, again, credit to Ian Garry being amazing. Again, people aren't going to like this, but it's like Shavkat Rakhmonov was painted out to be so unstoppable, so complete, that when he has a performance that doesn't show that, you do have to nitpick. You do have to reassess the situation. And people don't like that. Like Shavkat Rakhmonov, because I just fucking know this is how people react. People are going to be like, oh, critiquing Shavkat. What about Garry wasn't able to do anything? It's like, we expected him to win. We didn't expect Garry to win this one. He kind of surpassed our expectations. This is why it's an interesting conversation, right? I mean, I could just sit here and say, but Shavkat pulled it off. He's always the best, always the GOAT. It's like, but his wrestling is not that great. But yeah, great striking. I think if these guys were to stand up and strike for 5 rounds, that's the thing. Ian Garry, great striking, but Shavkat Rakhmonov, in my opinion, even though he got outstruck in the third, I think he's always going to be the guy that you have to kind of lean towards to win the majority of the striking exchanges or the rounds based on striking because he's the one that can actually hurt you. And that's the thing. I didn't see Ian Garry with any dangerous moments. He doesn't have a lot of power. He's not that explosive. He's kind of fast, right? He's a good athlete, but I'm just not seeing a dangerous guy on the feet. I'm seeing a guy that kind of needs to pick and prod at range. Whereas Shavkat, he has volume. He has very creative striking where he's able to just throw a spinning back fist with full commitment, no hesitation, and it looks great, and he can land it with speed, with power. So, yeah, I think that Rakhmonov is the more dangerous striker. I think that the way Rakhmonov is going to win a fight with Ian Garry in the future, the way Rakhmonov is going to beat people like Belal or Islam Makhachev is going to be with his striking. I don't know if he's going to be able to go out there and submit unless he rocks them first, a Belal, a Garry, okay, a Makhachev. I think his striking is actually going to be more of what he's going to need to pull off these wins at the highest level where the top 5 people in his division can always grapple. The Wonder Boys, okay, the Neil Magny's, there's no more of those guys. Everyone at the top of welterweight can wrestle. All right. He can submit people if he chokes them out. I mean, submit people if he chokes them out. He can submit people if he rocks them first, of course. I could definitely see that. But what makes Shavkat so dangerous is still, in my opinion, not only his submission game, but what's going to make him dangerous moving forward is the striking. Ian Garry, I think what's going to make Ian Garry more dangerous is not only changing his diet a bit, but also just, I think, trusting in his skills. Like, it's trusting in his offensive grappling and trusting in his combinations and volume, where it seemed like he didn't have that in the early rounds. I thought this was a good fight. I definitely thought it was a good fight. little bit boring with a lot of the clinching moments. Every striking exchange was pretty fun, and that 5th round was really entertaining where Garry almost got the finish. So yeah, did not live up to the expectations as far as entertainment goes, but it was a very high-level fight. Both guys are excellent. We did see some holes in both fighters' game. Shavkat, his offensive wrestling, and Ian Garry, his power or lack thereof, and I guess his volume early on in fights. He seems to be very cautious early on these days. He has not been opening up as much as he used to. But either way, that's also because he's fighting more dangerous fighters. Let's get on to the next one. Ciryl Gane and Alexander Volkov. This was an absolute abomination. And again, the judges gave it to the bigger name, right? They gave it to the ambassador of French MMA, but not Volkov, who is more under the radar, not a big name, hasn't fought John Jones, hasn't been in these big title fights, hasn't won an interim belt. This was a disgrace. Alexander Volkov surpassed our expectations. Ciryl Gane hasn't gotten that much better since their first fight. Volkov has gotten a lot better. Volkov, sort of like Shavkat early on in the Garry fight, was fully trusting in his striking. You could see it. He was not giving Gane any respect. He was letting his hands go, letting his kicks go, throwing combinations like a head kick immediately followed by a right hand, throwing lighter man's combinations, spinning back fist in the second round. Unbelievable, right? Volkov was taking the fight to him. Those body kicks were nasty. He's got really good body kicks as always. And also the wrestling, the grappling. Both guys actually have improved with their grappling. Gane was able to get out of some of those bad positions pretty well. He had some technical get-ups, but Volkov, in my opinion, won the first round. He won the second round, and he arguably won the third. I think he could have won every single round. The second round where he landed the spinning back fist, and he also outstruck Gane on the feet. The third round where he had a lot of control time, and I know there wasn't a whole lot going on the feet, but it was very clear that Volkov, even though he was landing pitter-pat shots, peppermint shots, he was landing shots. He was in a dominant position, and Gane wasn't. So how on earth did Gane win the third round? And how did Gane win 2 rounds, right? He couldn't have won the third. The first round, he got taken down and controlled a little bit. And then Volkov also, in my opinion, outstruck him. But this was a terrible robbery. And even though the future doesn't really matter, listen, I'm not going to sit here and complain because, Volkov deserves a title fight now. It's like he does. But one of the reasons why I don't really care about the future is because both of these guys get smoked by Tom Aspinall. And that was something that was a little bit unfortunate, right? If Gane went out there and dominated Alexander Volkov, then things might get interesting. You might say, all right, well, this is actually someone that could, if he doesn't get KO'd, outstrike Aspinall. But I didn't see that. All right, Alexander Volkov, yes, he's improved, but is he going to test Aspinall? I don't think so. So it does kind of suck that after Jones retires, whether or not he fights Aspinall, after he retires, there really isn't any test for him. And this is why I think Aspinall's got an easy path to becoming the GOAT. Not that he doesn't have fighters that are skilled. I mean, Gane is a skilled fighter. Volkov is a skilled fighter. Pavlovich is dangerous. But in general, he's just so far ahead of everyone else. Who the fuck is going to beat him? And it's not going to be Volkov or Gane who don't have KO power. So that is unfortunate that we don't have a really competitive fight for Aspinall. Someone to make it that interesting. But yeah, I mean, this was a horrible robbery. You saw the second that fight got called, or the second the judge's decision was in, Gane walked out of the cage. He was pissed. He knew the crowd knew that he lost that fight as well. And that's why he walked out of the cage, because he kind of wanted to just not take as much heat. If he had just put his hands up and been like, yeah, which he also wouldn't have done that just because he knew he lost. But if he had just remained in the cage, he knew that people would have booed. So he thought that maybe I should just leave. Maybe that'll get me some respect. And yeah, I mean, Volkov was pissed. You rarely see fighters have a post-fight interview after they lost. It's only when, or only if they're like in a main event or something like that, or they're a huge name. But someone that's just in the feature fight, in one of these fights, they have a post-fight press conference, it's because they're pissed about getting robbed. He got fucked over. He deserved this win. He was on a 4-fight win streak. This would have been the biggest win of his entire career. He could have got his revenge on Gane. This could have been the completion of his redemption arc, where it's time for Volkov to come back. He puts on muscle. He's actually getting better. Gane is chilling, filming movies. And they rewarded the Ciryl Gane, who's been inactive, just because he's a bigger name. So this just really pissed me off. Like, what the fuck, man? Dana White talked to Volkov after the fight. And we've seen fighters get fucked over and get robbed in these sorts of number one contenders fights and then actually get a title shot after. We saw that with Jose Aldo and Marlon Moraes. Aldo beat Marlon Moraes, got robbed, and the UFC gave him a title fight against Petr Yan in his next outing to award him. So hopefully we see something like that. But again, on Volkov's record, it's going to say he lost to Gane twice, which is just pathetic. So yeah, this was a robbery. I think we can all understand that. I feel bad for the guy. He's not getting his win money. So yeah, hopefully the UFC gives him a title shot next. But I'm not going to lie, I'm just not that hyped for Aspinall's future. If it's not Jon Jones, how can you get that excited for a Volkov rematch? In a way, it'd be interesting to see a Ciryl Gane fight because we've never seen that. But I just still don't think he's competitive. There's no one that can test Aspinall other than Jon Jones. So let's get on to the next one. Bryce Mitchell and Kron Gracie. I'm happy to see Bryce get a finish, especially after the way he was knocked out against Josh Emmett. Kron Gracie had a couple of moments in that second round where he came close to an armbar, but just couldn't get it done, and Bryce Mitchell outgrappled him in the first. Kron Gracie was landing some hard right hands. Got to say that, though. He was landing some good right hands. That was interesting, right? Bryce Mitchell said he hit hard. He's got some thud behind his punches, that's for sure. We saw the third round. Kron Gracie was pulling guard really fast. They were like colliding into each other. Bryce Mitchell slammed him on the ground. That probably concussed Kron Gracie, but then the elbow that landed immediately after and the next one just put him out cold. So a really slick finish for Bryce Mitchell. He needed that. If he went to a decision, it would be more of the same, even though Bryce Mitchell's an entertaining guy and he has fun interviews and all that. He has decisions that are boring. So I'm happy that he didn't have a decision. I'm happy that he went out there and got a TKO. Again, after that Emmett loss, I really wanted to see him win, and in spectacular fashion. What's next for him? I don't know who he called out. I know Dooho Choi called him out. We're going to talk about that, by the way. Dooho Choi is looking really, really good. That could be a great fight as well. And Dooho Choi, we may as well just get on to that. So I'm happy for Bryce Mitchell. I'm really happy that he got it done. Great finish. Man, Dooho Choi looked unbelievable. This is the best he's ever looked. Going into this fight, this just seemed like it was a fun, unranked fight. But now, I mean, Dooho Choi is looking to be as skilled as a ranked fighter. Listen, we've seen Nate Landwehr have a war with David Onama, who is also a good fighter. David Onama beat Jonathan Pierce. He's had a couple of good wins since. Like, that's a solid fighter. We've seen Nate Landwehr go out there and actually compete with Dan Ige. Dooho Choi had a better performance against Nate Landwehr than Dan Ige did. Completely embarrassed him in the first round, made him look silly, and went out there and submitted him, or TKO'd him, I believe. Was it it was a ground and pound TKO, I guess. Oh, yeah. He got him down in a crucifix position. Nate Landwehr couldn't get out of it. Ref stopped it. But yeah, just total domination. Dooho Choi, his boxing looks really solid, really technical. His grappling looks excellent. Nate Landwehr got dominated. I expected Landwehr to win this one, but Dooho Choi has leveled up a lot. He had a lot of time off. Was that because he was serving in the military? I know a lot of South Korean fighters, they have to serve in the military. Maybe that was it. I'm happy that he's back because now we have a new interesting contender at featherweight. Him versus Bryce Mitchell would be a great fight. That'd be an awesome fight. Let's give Dooho Choi a chance. Now we'll get to something a little bit sad. First off, this was a bittersweet one because Dominick Reyes, I'm happy to see this guy win. Now he's on a 2-fight win streak. The dark time is over. Reyes is back on a win streak. His last 2 fights have been dominant, knocking out Jacoby and now TKOing Anthony Smith. What was it, the third round or was it the second round? He basically had a 10-2 round in the second. That was like a 10-1. Anthony Smith curled up into the fetal position. You know, listen, I'm really happy for Dominick Reyes. We'll get to how he actually looked in the first. I may as well just get to it now. Even though Dominick Reyes was outstriking Anthony Smith in the first round, his striking still looks a little bit clunky. And it's kind of shocking watching him look a little bit clunky, not all that put together. He doesn't look like the most natural striker. It's kind of shocking that this guy actually outstruck Jon Jones for 3 rounds. It just goes to show that light heavyweight speed mixed with the ignorance is bliss mentality, not giving Jones any respect, actually imposing his will, and also just the lack of boxing of Jon Jones. I guess that's what happened. But Dominick Reyes' striking does not look that good. All right? It looks a little bit clunky. He looks a little bit stiff. You know, I think he's going to get beat by an Olberg. I think he's going to get beat by a Jamal Hill. I think if he rematches Jan Blachowicz, he'll get beat. So I'm a little bit worried for him moving forward. Even like a Volkan Ozdemir, that could be a very dangerous fight for him as well. But I'm really happy that he won. All right. And hopefully they just give him a grappler next, because I want to see him continue to win. To give him the best chance to get back to a belt, that'd be great. But a little bit worried for him moving forward. But man, Anthony Smith, that second round, and this is the thing. Anthony Smith's grappling, like, he is a good submission artist. And he actually went for a couple of takedowns. Anthony Smith never goes for takedowns. That was interesting. I was happy to see him at least try, at least attempt it. Right? But what is it about this guy where every single time he gets put in a bottom position, like, he talks about his jiu-jitsu as being really good and all that, he doesn't do anything but go into the fetal position and just sit there. And maybe just tries to fight one wrist. Like, where is the attempt to get up? You know what I mean? He's just so content to just sit there. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Against Reyes, against Magomed Ankalaev, against Glover Teixeira, against Jon Jones, against Alexander Gustafsson. Like, what is going on? It'd be one thing if he was fighting to get up and he was getting his ass kicked. There's nothing he can do. Where Reyes had his legs trapped like Khabib used to trap people's legs, right? Or Reyes had his back and he was just beating him up. There's nothing Anthony Smith can do. But Anthony Smith is just like Reyes. Reyes is basically separated from Anthony Smith, just punching him. And Anthony Smith, at any moment, it seems, could just pop up. I know it's not that simple. Obviously, that I'm exaggerating, but no attempt. No fighting? I don't get it. I don't understand it. There seems to be a bit of a mental block with Anthony Smith. If someone gets a dominant position on him, he just sits there and just gives up in these moments and goes into the ball. He says that this could be the last time he's getting in the octagon. And I think, honestly, that could be a good move, because I don't know if I want to see this again. I don't know if I want to see Anthony Smith get beat up like this and take all this damage again, because it just seems like it's going to happen every single time at this point. So this could be it for Anthony Smith. How is he going to be remembered? As a fighter's fighter. Anthony Smith was a fighter's fighter, right? For a few years, hardcore fans of the sport loved Anthony Smith interviews. Had his moments where he would go out there and actually win sometimes, and those were good moments, but I guess just a classic fighter's fighter. Didn't win the belt, but most people don't win the belt, right? Most people don't win the belt. Stuck around a little bit too long, and that's just how it goes. Hopefully he has a great retirement, and we're going to miss, especially me, I'm going to miss seeing Anthony Smith interviews and fights. But man, it was just rough to watch this guy. Second round, just doing nothing. So I think it actually is the right move for him to hang up the gloves, right? What's the point of coming back, taking all that damage? And for Dominick Reyes, this actually seemed like a step down in competition. Who's he going to fight next? I don't know, but it's going to be a dangerous fight, that's for sure. And I'm a little bit worried for him because, listen, Anthony Smith has always had a decent chin, right? He's always been pretty durable. It's not like you can easily knock him out. Khalil did it, but outside of that, no one really drops Anthony Smith that often. Dominick Reyes has a lot of pop. He was landing some good shots on Anthony Smith, still wasn't able to get him out of there. Even in that first round where Anthony Smith was taking like 5 jabs and sort of seemed like Smith was in an edit. Like, you can't hurt me. What? You're just getting jabbed up. You're just getting pieced up. 10 punch combinations. It's like, all right, dude, you could try to be in an edit all you want. You're still getting hit with a 10 piece. But Dominick Reyes has not got this like Rumble Johnson power, and he doesn't have the smoothest technique. I don't think he's got the deepest tool bag on the feet, and that's ultimately why Jan Blachowicz beat him, because Blachowicz just has more in his striking arsenal, and he also hits hard. So if Dominick Reyes fights an Olberg next, if he fights a Roundtree next or someone like that, that's going to be a really dangerous matchup. But let's get on to the next one. Vicente Luque. I picked him to win this fight. I knew he was going to be too much. I knew this was too high of a level for Themba. Themba wouldn't be ready. He just went to a clinch fest decision with Niko Price, who is the slowest fighter on the roster, literally called the dodo bird. How are you going to beat Vicente Luque with some of the nastiest submissions in the welterweight division, who's got nasty power, who's fought the best of the best? It was too early. It was too soon. You can't finesse your way out of these sorts of matchups where you're just pushed to the top too soon. I know Vicente Luque is not necessarily the fighter he used to be, but Vicente Luque is just too high level to get beat by a guy taking Niko Price to a clinch fest, all right? This was a levels performance. This is exactly why I picked Vicente Luque. Just simply a much higher skilled fighter, right? Themba just wasn't ready. Got rocked. Luque landed one of the big punches that he's got, that classic Vicente Luque power, and then wrapped him up in an anaconda. Fastest anaconda choke in UFC history, and Themba goes to sleep. It's similar to Asakura. You know Themba's not going to tap, but sometimes you just can't overcome a skill gap like this. And Vicente, who is he losing to? Buckley, right? He's losing to Jeff Neal. He's losing to Bilal Muhammad. But Themba Gorimbo, I thought this was a little bit too soon. I thought that maybe you give him someone that's a little bit better than Niko, but a little bit worse than Vicente Luque. Aljo versus Evloev. Man, even though this wasn't the striking battle that I expected, and I know that some people may say, what do you mean you expected a striking battle? Well, often when two grapplers are fighting, they end up not testing each other's grappling, not trying to expend a lot of energy, and seeing who the better striker is. Listen, this was a really high-level grappling match. I actually enjoyed watching it. I'm happy that Aljo made it as competitive as he did. I was kind of rooting for him, though, because he won the first round. Aljo was up 1-0 on Evloev. Not only did he actually stay true to his word and throw caution to the wind on the feet and not give Evloev any respect, not only not giving him respect on the feet, but just taking him down at will. Aljo came in there with a chip on his shoulder. He said he felt disrespected. He said that, he was the former champion. Evloev's the up-and-comer. I'm going to put this guy in his place. And he actually did that. This guy was landing step-in elbows. He was gritting down on his shots, and Evloev was landing the harder strikes, but in the first round, it was all Aljo, right? Took him down, controlled him, pissed Evloev off. And in the second round, Evloev got control over Aljo, landed a big strike, took him down after Aljamain was outstriking him. And it was 1-1 going into the third. Aljamain controlled the first half of the third round. And in a scramble, he kept going for the back, even though he had control over Evloev. In going for the back, he wound up on bottom. Evloev controlled him, landed a couple of pitter-pat shots on the ground. And those pitter-pat shots with the control time, basically the same amount of control time that Aljamain had in the first half of the round, won him the fight. But Aljo was one mistake away. Similar to Garry in the Rakhmonov fight, where Garry was controlling Shavkat and then went for the... Shavkat was controlling Garry. Garry was winning the striking in the fourth. And instead of separating out of a grappling exchange, Garry attempted to go for a submission on the feet, which got him into more trouble. Aljamain Sterling was controlling Evloev and was just set on trying to take his back, and he really couldn't do it in the third round, and Evloev reversed the position. He was one mistake away from probably winning that fight. And listen, This was real competitive. And although I don't think that Evloev is going to be a real test to a Volk or to Ilia Topuria, we do have to say that this was, for the most part, a grappling fight. Aljamain Sterling is as high level as it gets. Not only is he one of the better grapplers in the sport, but he's also coming up to 145 with the lighter man skill grappling, which, again, just gives him more of a boost. So, listen, Evloev said he expected more striking, and I picked him to win this fight because I think that his striking has improved a lot. But this was, for the most part, grappling, so it's easy to sit here and say, well, these guys didn't look that dangerous. They're not going to test Ilia Topuria, but it's like we really only saw grappling exchanges. But at the same time, I still don't see a guy that can beat Topuria, let alone Volkanovski. Like, I think that Volkanovski is finishing Movsar Evloev. And I think that Ilia Topuria is as well. This is not the guy. But what do you do with him? Maybe Diego Lopez, a rematch. Winner gets a title fight. Gets to fight the winner of Topuria versus Volk, which would be Topuria. But if he beats Diego Lopez, then we're kind of getting out another really interesting contender who actually is more hype and actually has a good chance to finish Topuria. Like, you don't want to get rid of Diego Lopez right now. So he's in an unfortunate position, right? Because I don't want to see him fight Diego Lopez because I want to see Lopez fight Topuria, which is why I don't mind the Volk fight. But yeah, this was a good fight. I actually thought it was pretty entertaining, high-level grappling, just a lot more competitive than I thought, okay? Another disgraceful robbery, Randy Brown. Listen, Randy Brown's getting better. I've been critical of this guy in the past. I've been saying he's one of these pit-pat guys on the feet. Doesn't really commit to his strikes. He just kind of flicks, a teep at range, and that's basically it. But the last two fights, knocking out Salikov, and now embarrassing Brian Battle in the first round and landing 10-piece combinations, Randy Brown's actually starting to become an entertaining striker. And not only is he starting to become an entertaining striker, Brian Battle, the Butcher, was the one that made it boring. Was the one that was clinching. Oh, wait, let me guess. Hey, clinching is a part of MMA too. We got to count it, right? Get that nonsense out of here. All right, I would understand it if Randy Brown lost the second and third round because he landed no strikes and Brian Battle was clinching him up against the fence and landing knees to the midsection. Randy Brown, every single moment this fight was on the feet in the second and third round, this dude was landing 10-piece combinations. Every round there was at least one 10-piece from Randy Brown. Here's Randy Brown. He's backing up Brian Battle. 2 punches upstairs, 2 punches to the body, 2 punches upstairs. How the fuck did Brian Battle win this fight? He got schooled in the first. The commentators knew it. We all knew it. He got schooled in the first. Randy Brown was fucking him up. How many 3-piece combinations did Randy Brown land with 1 shot upstairs and 2 to the body? A jab upstairs, 1-2 to the body. How many of those did he land in this fight? Probably like 10? An even split of those every single round? There was like 3 of those combinations in the third, and they give the fight to Brian Battle. Why? Because he's a bigger name and he can sell fights on the mic and he cuts good promos? Listen, I'm a fan of Brian Battle. He didn't look his best. Again, I know maybe because he missed weight. Who knows? He could have been injured going into this, and this may have not been the best version of himself, but still, this guy got beat. Fair and square. He lost this fucking fight. And Randy Brown, for the first time in his career, is actually looking like an entertaining fighter, and he's getting fucked over. So this one pissed me off, just like it did to Volkov. Just like it did in the Volkov fight. Just, what the fuck? How does he win this? Randy Brown landed a 10-piece in the third. Oh, but Brian Battle's clinching now. He's got 2 minutes of control time with little measly knees to the body. Randy Brown won this fight. It's going down in history as a Randy Brown win. 10-piece combinations in the second, 10-piece in the third. Maybe you give the second round to Brian Battle. There is absolutely 0 chance he won the third round. He got outstruck easily. That clinch time. Oh, he's clinching now. I don't give a shit if he had 3 minutes of control time in the clinch in the third round. Randy Brown landed at least 20 clean, significant strikes on the feet and absolutely schooled him in the first. This was a 29-28 schooling decision. It wasn't even close. First round, third round weren't even close. Dude, you got to give it to Brian Battle, man. He clinched him up. It's like, dude, this wasn't even one of those fights where Muniz versus the Iron Turtle, where Muniz controls the Iron Turtle for 4 minutes and 15 seconds, has no damage, but the Iron Turtle in the last 30 seconds of the round lands like a barrage of punches and concusses the other guy. It wasn't even one of those where Brian Battle had 90% of the round via control time, but Brown landed a couple strikes. No, like Brown won a couple of minutes of that third round, and it was on the feet, landing punches that actually matter. So this was a disgrace. An absolute disgrace, an abomination. This, in my opinion, was a worse robbery than the Volkov Gane one. That was a robbery too, but the rounds with Volkov and Gane were more competitive than this. Round 3 and round 1 were 100% Randy Brown rounds. So yeah, people were saying Volkov Gane was a bad one. Like, that was a robbery, 100%. This was even worse. This is probably the worst robbery I've seen of the entire year. What a fucking disgrace. Why? Just because Brian Battle's a bigger name. And he missed weight too. Chris Weidman, Eryk Anders beat the shit out of Chris Weidman. You know, we talk about Chris Weidman's grappling, and as soon as Chris Weidman got control of Eryk Anders in the first round, the commentators started talking about, oh, we're in Weidman's world now. I even think a coach, maybe it was Longo, that said, he's in your world now, Chris. Really in his world. Where Weidman couldn't land any ground and pound, couldn't do anything, couldn't come close to a submission. People talk about Weidman, like his training partners, like he's the best grappler ever. He's a monster. Couldn't do anything on the ground. Unfortunate, right? It was Eryk Anders that when he got control over Chris Weidman on the ground, looked like Khabib Nurmagomedov. Eryk Anders had a 10-5 round against Chris Weidman that I'm happy was stopped because Weidman was basically out of it, and we didn't need to see him take any more damage. Could have stopped it even earlier. Honestly, it was a bit of a late stoppage, but Eryk Anders 10-5'd Chris Weidman. It was, again, one of those strange occurrences where Weidman's supposed to be the good grappler, and here comes Eryk Anders, the striker, who's looking like Khabib on Chris Weidman, which is, I think that's a sign that Weidman needs to hang him up. All right. I picked Eryk Anders to win this fight, so I'm happy to see him get this one done. I think that's it for Chris Weidman. I think at this point, you may as well hang him up. If you're getting done like that against Eryk Anders, if Eryk Anders is looking like the most dangerous grappler on the planet, against a former All-American wrestler, I think that maybe it's time. Joshua Van, Cody Durden. Joshua Van gets it done. Cody Durden took a lot of damage in this fight. Joshua Van, not surprising. Great takedown defense. We expected that. Bit of a slow starter as usual, but second, third round just annihilated Cody Durden on the feet. Looked to be the much more comfortable guy. The best volume striker in the UFC right now. Honestly, I know Max Holloway's still around, but Joshua Van's volume, especially because he's a flyweight, he's just got the ability to throw even more because he's lighter. I think this guy is really entertaining, right? Amazing boxing, crazy output, willing to take damage. The one problem, though, and people are saying, like, Joshua Van's a future champ and all that, and I think that he's only, 23 years old? I mean, how good is this guy going to be when he's 28? He could be a champion, I understand that, but the lack of power from Joshua Van, and I know this is something that can change as he ages, as he puts on more muscle. I get it. I think he can hit harder in the future, but that is just something we have to bring up. There is a very obvious shortcoming to Joshua Van's game, and that is the lack of power. Joshua Van has amazing striking. He's got great volume. He's got better boxing than most fighters in his division, if not basically all of them, just from a volume perspective. Maybe not the best boxer yet. There are levels to the flyweight division. But listen, Cody Durden's making it to a decision with him, and he's basically getting the kitchen sink. All right? What's it going to look like when you have someone that is 2 times the striker of a Cody Durden, but just as tough, who, even though they may get out-volumed, actually starts landing some shots on Joshua Van? And we saw him get finished by Charles Johnson. That's my worry. His striking's amazing. His volume is amazing. he's got no ability to hurt people, right? And I think that if he fights someone that's in the top 10, like a Moreno, Pantoja, listen, these fights aren't going to happen anytime soon, but a Kai Kara-France, a Steve Erceg, Cody Durden's not known for his striking. I mean, these guys are going to be able to take the punishment and dish out good strikes of their own, and they're going to be able to hurt him. So I'm worried for Joshua Van in the future because although, again, he's a good striker, he's not dangerous on the feet. He doesn't have a lot of power. And unless he packs more of a punch in the future, unless he puts on some more strength and gets more explosive, people are going to be able to just take the damage and knock him out. All right? Because other flyweights have good striking too. You don't need the same volume as him to be able to have a competitive fight with him. You just got to have some power and good technique and decent striking. And I think that is going to be enough. So don't get too carried away on the Joshua Van is 100% a lock to be a champion. Like he has no power. And that's unfortunate because of how entertaining his striking is. But if he can't hurt other guys, like it's the flyweight division. Everyone's skilled. Everyone has decent striking at the top. Like people are just going to be able to finish him. So a little bit worried about that because, again, he is hittable. But a great performance nonetheless. Just something to think about. Chiesa and Max Griffin. I picked Michael Chiesa just because Max Griffin has no ability to impose his will. I mean, Max Griffin might be the most frustrating fighter to watch in the UFC. I've said that he arguably is the most boring fighter in the UFC. All right? I know that when people think of boring, they think of like a Makayev or they think of a Merab or Bilal, right? And although Makayev is kind of boring, when I think of the most boring fighters in the UFC, I think about the strikers. Because think about, striking is supposed to be where the damage takes place, where the knockouts are, where the wars are. If you have someone on the feet that's standing, that supposedly has this mystique of a power puncher, because Max Griffin, he's kind of a built guy. Oh, you think he's going to hit hard. When a guy like Max Griffin throws 4 fucking strikes around, there's something about that style that is the most annoying, frustrating style to watch. And I predicted this fight to be a Michael Chiesa fight because of it. Chiesa just has the ability to impose his will. I've never seen Max Griffin impose his will, ever. This guy goes out there as if he's just already been pre-programmed to only throw 6 strikes around. And that's it. Doesn't let his hands go, doesn't commit to his strikes. And you got Michael Chiesa winning a fight because he's fucking backing up and landing some strikes. And it's like if Max Griffin just threw 10 more punches per round, he would obviously win this fight, but he can't do it. I don't understand it. I just think, like, listen, he's got speed, he's got some power, he's got okay technique. He does not have an ability to impose his will. All right, and it makes for the most boring style in the UFC. Michael Chiesa on a 2-fight win streak. Max Griffin losing again just because he doesn't do anything. Clay Guida, Chase Hooper. I thought this was a classic Chase Hooper fight, destroying Clay Guida, submitting him, getting him out of there in the first round. Yeah, I mean, Chase Hooper's a beast. He continues to get better. Future submission king, maybe? I could see Chase Hooper working his way up on the all-time list when it comes to submissions because he's basically getting the 100% finish rate these days. He's finishing everybody and not having a boring performance. This guy is incapable of being a boring grappler, whether it's ground and pound or constant good scrambles, throwing up submissions and actually hitting them. Chase Hooper's arguably one of the most entertaining grapplers we've ever seen. And I can't wait to see his next fight. I think this guy actually has championship potential, all right? Because he came into the UFC as a black belt when he was like 18 years old, right? Now he's been in the UFC for like 5 years, and his grappling is still getting better, and he still has a lot of time to improve, and he's dominating everyone. Yeah, again, he may not look that dangerous, but Chase Hooper is an absolute monster on the ground. Kennedy Nzechukwu, Lucas Brzeski. I predicted Kennedy Nzechukwu to win this fight via lighter man skill. And you know what? Lucas Brzeski actually surprised me a little bit. His boxing looked pretty crisp, but it was only a matter of time. Kennedy Nzechukwu seemed to be biding his time, waiting for the right moment. And he finally got it, knocking out Lucas Brzeski in the last 10 seconds with a big right hand, putting him away. Not a surprising win. Kennedy gets it done. Lighter man skill reigns supreme. I think he should fight someone in the top 10 next. That would be interesting. Maybe Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Gane. That could be a good future fight. I know that's not going to happen next, but that could be interesting, right? I think that could be really interesting. Both guys have a similar reach, similar fight style. I'd like to see that. But yeah, that was it. How many did I get right? I got this right, this right, this right. That's 3, 4, 5. I mean, I picked Battle. I picked him, but he didn't win. I'm going to say I got that wrong. I picked Evloev, so that's 6, 7. I picked Luque, 8. I got this one wrong, 8-2, 9-2. I got this one wrong too. Volkov won, so 9-3, 10-3, 11-3. 11-3, if you count the robberies, I went 13-1. The only fight I actually got wrong on the paper was Dooho, Choi, and Nate Landwehr. Every other fight I got right. So I did pretty well with my predictions, even if we're going to count the robberies, which we should count them. I technically went 11-3. On paper, 13-1. So that's a pretty good way to wrap things up. And people are going to say, oh, you picked the easiest ones. Oh, you picked the easiest ones. It's like, I mean, most people picked Themba. All right. Most people picked Weidman. A lot of people picked Max Griffin. Most people picked Guida. Everyone was picking Guida, man. I had a mastermind picking Chase Hooper. That was a high IQ pick. Nah, that was an easy one. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time.